Good evening, it's me again. I would like to share a story with you to illustrate the role of the informal sector in job creation in Africa. I met Samuel Adungu in the year 2010 while working on a research project in Nairobi, Kenya. The project was to evaluate the welfare impact of health insurance and unconditional cash transfers on the lives of informal sector workers. He was 25, married with 2 kids. Like many young Kenyans, he had moved to the city 5 years earlier after completing his high school education in Western Kenya. College was not an option, as both his parents had died, and his grandfather, who was taking care of him, also died when he was in high school. So one of the uncles advised him to head to Nairobi and look for work. He went to a part of Nairobi called Kamukunji Juakali to work in the informal sector. Juakali means hot sun or fierce sun in Kiswahili. It's an open-air informal manufacturing hub with around 5,000 men and women operating out of temporary sheds made from iron sheets or out in the open under the hot sun, hammering on scrap metal, iron sheets, turning trash into treasure, making stoves, pots, pans, wheelbarrows, storage boxes, and other household or farm implements. There are support enterprises that have mushroomed around Kamukunji Juakali. You'll find food vendors, repair people, brokers who act as middlemen between the manufacturers and the customers, traditional medicine people. Right next to Kamukunji Juakali is Gikomba Market, which is the biggest open-air market in Kenya, where you can buy anything from second-hand clothes, traditional medicine, you can get your clothes repaired, you can buy shoes, you can find anything you need in Gikomba Market. The term Juakali has therefore come to include all the millions of Kenyans all over the country who work as vendors, who work as artisans, who work as service providers. Unfortunately, the informal sector is not regulated or recognized by the government. This means they lose out on the benefits that are enjoyed by the formal sector. So actually, a little historical point here, the Kamukunji area, the area where Kamukunji Juakali is located, was originally formed as a peripheral trading post by Africans who are not allowed in the city center bazaar of Nairobi. It was illegal, they were harassed, but it survived all these years, and actually it's continuing to grow in size and importance. Back to Samuel. So he got to Kamukunji Juakali. He could not afford to pay for training. He was accepted as an apprentice. He was trained. He was learning on the job. He learned to make metal boxes out of iron sheets. Within a few months, he was able to make boxes. And then he moved on to tinsmith work, which he described to me as molding of items such as pots, pans, buckets, basins, and tin lamps by hammering on sheets of metal. On a good day, he would earn around 800 Kenya shillings, which is approximately $8, which is barely enough to support his family. Why is this important? For Samuel and millions of vulnerable Kenyans, the poor, the young, the women, those who cannot make a living out of the rural areas, Juakali, or the informal sector, is the only viable livelihood option. Recent World Bank data put youth unemployment in Kenya at 22%. This is lagging behind job growth. The population of Kenya is lagging behind the number of jobs created by the formal sector. The same report also says that in Kenya, the informal sector contributes to 3/4 of employment and 1/3 of the economy. It's growing at 10 times the rate of formal employment. Over 60% of those in the informal sector are between the ages of 18 to 35, while 50% of them are women. And what about the rest of Africa? A study by the African Development Bank says that more than 2/3 of African jobs are in the informal sector, contributing to 1/3 of the GDP. Working in the informal sector for Samuel and others is not without challenges. For starters, it's a high-risk environment. There are no safety equipment. There are no gloves, helmets, safety boots, first aid kits, or fire extinguishers. So this leaves them extremely vulnerable to work-related accidents, to hearing loss from the extremely noisy environment, to pollution-related respiratory ailments. They work in temporary structures, and these are prone to destruction by the elements, by fire, by floods. They labor for long hours. They have no access to benefits such as pension, health insurance, or leave days. For the business owners who employ Samuel and others, they're not recognized by government, and because of that, they have no access to business finance or property rights. So the temporary structures they operate out of cannot be used as collateral for loans. There's a long and complicated taxation and registration system, and there's an absence of tangible benefits resulting from formalization, and this discourages many from formalizing their businesses. But despite all these challenges, Samuel and others in the informal sector continue to use their knowledge of indigenous networks and resources to innovate and improvise solutions. For example, in response to lack of access to formal financial services, they have formed informal networks called chamas, where they pool money together and they share it out regularly. And these chamas also play the role of social support groups in case of emergencies, such as deaths or sickness. The amount of money they save together is not very big, so the impact is limited. But the social capital built reduces the transaction costs through the trust and relationships in the community. So in spite of the systemic constraints, the informal sector continues to grow. How can we make it work better? How can we make their lives easier? Well, first and foremost, we need to give them the respect, recognition, and space that Juakali or the informal sector deserves, just as we give the formal sectors. Instead of rushing to formalize them simply for tax-based expansion, governments should recognize the sector's contribution to the economy and make the sector experience the actual benefits, such as improved access to services, infrastructure, and finance. Engagement of all stakeholders to address the issue is important, but unfortunately previous partnerships to design solutions for the informal sectors were not giving serious attention, or actually ignoring those who actually live the experience, those who actually work in the informal sector. So if we want to sustainably create jobs for African youth, we need to increase productivity of the informal sector. We need better infrastructure and access to capital and an inclusive business climate, because this will lower the cost of production and attract more labor. We can also enhance productivity by improving access to technology, enabling those in the informal sector to access new ways of trading, marketing their product, and working. An example is M-Pesa in Kenya, which is an innovative mobile phone-based digital money platform used for payments, savings, credit, and access to market information. So as the population of Africa is increasing at a faster rate than formal jobs can be created, the informal economy or the informal sector will continue playing an increasingly important role as a source of jobs for youth. And to benefit from this potential of the growing population, governments, informal sector, public sector, international organization, we should all listen to the voices of Samuel and others working in the informal sector. Thank you.